All right, let's talk about the transmission and a couple other items. These are hydraulic motor mounts. I think you can see how easy these move. This is what gives you a smooth ride, no vibration feedback to the chassis or steering wheel. When you place this in the chassis, these heat shields stay right here. These are vertical. They drop into our frame mounts. A lot of guys bend these out and put it around the outside of the frame mount. Not how GM intended it. They're supposed to be vertical, and our frame mounts are designed so that they'll sit inside the frame mount. This is a knock sensor here. These get damaged pretty easily. Once you get the engine in, you're going to want to loosen this bolt and then turn it. You can turn them 360 degrees so that the wires stay as far away from the exhaust and other items as possible. Now, let's look at the shifter. This Jeep's getting an Atlas transfer case, so we're going to end up using this. This is one of our powder-coated brackets, which will hold the automatic shift lever or cable. This is a shift lever that we're going to supply in the kit, and it's the proper length for the stock JK 6-position shifter. That's park, reverse, neutral, drive, second, and first. And you just basically snap the cable on, snap it into here. You will notice that these slots are slotted a little bit for a little bit of adjustment. There's also an adjustment up at the shifter end, so you have plenty of adjustment. Now, most of you aren't running Atlas, so you're going to be running this shifter plate. Now, this shifter plate has the transfer case bracket on it, and you can see that not only is that slotted, but if you look at the back side here, you'll see there's multiple holes, 3 sets of holes. The reason we did that is early on we found guys were running 241Cs, 241Js, different transfer case setups with different adapters, and we actually offer two different length adapters ourselves for the 2-door and the 4-doors. So by having these 3 different holes in these slots, it pretty much gives you all the adjustability you need for any transfer case cable. Another thing you're going to notice here, this is a newer style bracket that has an offset. Guys are running 1350 shafts with large diameter tubes, and we were having issues with the transfer case or the shifter cable stands contacting the drive shaft. So you can see here that we have now offset that so it sits closer to the transmission. Gives you an extra ½ inch clearance. So essentially you're going to bolt that on, leave everything loose until you get everything hooked up. That means on the top you'll have the shifter plugged in, then place it in park, tighten these bolts down, and if you have any fine tuning after that, you can go up to the top. There's an 8mm screw on the shifter cable end that you can use for fine tuning on the top. As far as the transfer case goes, I suggest you put it in neutral. Put the shifter in neutral, that's the gate that goes left to right, and adjust this so that the transfer case is in neutral. Then the two steps forward are going to be your 4 high and 2 high, and then one behind it's going to be 4 low. But use neutral as your starting point. If you try setting it up in 2 high, your neutral point may not be where you want it to be. Being on the other side here, we can see the 6L80 transmission cooler lines. You'll notice these are not like the earlier 4-speed cooler lines that had tapered flares or seated connectors. This has actually got a block that bolts in with one 10mm bolt, and I really like it. They very rarely leak, so make sure you use a new gasket. It's a compression gasket, and you'll never have a problem with it. And that's about it as far as the transmission goes. We will cover the output shaft and the adapter later. I think you can see how large the output shaft is on the 6L80. This is a 4-wheel drive 6L80, so it has plugs already here, and it has a seal installed. If this was a two-wheel drive 6L80, which we do support, these would be open. It's a wet adapter, so you need to put freeze plugs in there. Sometimes it's hard to find that size freeze plug, so we make our own pins, I guess you would say, and we insert them in there, and then just get a stock four-wheel drive output shaft seal, and you'll be good. You don't want fluid in that transfer case adapter. The two-wheel drive shafts also need to be cut off to this length. If you do have a two-wheel drive transmission, we'll tell you how long that has to be. But we don't run the 4-speeds anymore with the smaller input or output shafts. These LSs, this LS for example, is going to be putting out close to 450 horsepower. And if you guys remember back in the 80s and 90s, the V8 was putting out 180, 200 horsepower, where the 4L65s and the smaller output shafts were sufficient. But in today's world, with large tires and 400 or 500 horsepower, you're going to have problems if you try running a small output shaft. So this is why we run the 6L80. It's good for 800 foot-pounds of torque. We've never had an output shaft failure. And once the 241J is upgraded to our input gear, you are good up to 450 to 500 horsepower, and there's no worries there. So the next video we'll try to cover the accessory drive, and we're going to spend some time in the accessory drive. That's where I get the most amount of questions. Done properly, good for life. If you don't set the accessory drive up right, you're going to have issues.